So, ladies and gentlemen, we've got a very special guest here today. We have the Managing Director of CBRE, David Milton. Welcome on board.
Thanks, Theo. Very pleased to be here.
David has a very impressive resume or career, you could say. He has been in project marketing for 30 years, was one of the, founding members, you could say, of CBRE 15 years ago. CBRE is a nationwide business. In Sydney alone, some years they sell up to 2,500 units just in 1 year. And David's basically in charge of running that whole division. In your career, I think I've got here that you've sold over $30 billion worth of real estate.
Yeah, we added that up for this podcast, Theo, so I wasn't aware of that until this morning.
Yeah, that's fantastic. So obviously a guy like you, David, would be seeing a lot of activity, a lot of buyer sort of feedback on the front line with such high volume of projects and stock that you need to move. Naturally, you'll get exposure on the front line straight away to current market conditions and reactions to what's going on economically, globally and locally. So on that note, what are you seeing? What's the latest?
Well, the market's pretty tough at the moment. We've got a lot of buyers that were intending buying being very, I'll say, conservative, a little bit more conservative, conscious of rising interest rates and what impact that'll have on their ability to not only service their loan, but where you're selling to empty nesters on their ability around sort of self-funded retiring or financing lifestyle. So we've got a market that is undersupplied, greatly undersupplied. Some of the stats in Sydney are there'll be about 7,100 apartments finished this year. That's, if you look at the highs of 2017, there were 30 or 28,500 apartments finished.
Oh, wow. That's a huge difference.
Huge difference. There's typically approvals generally run in the 25,000 mark a year. This year, I think the approvals for new apartments will be 8,200. So we've not only got a great undersupply of stock going forward, that stock is not going to be replenished very quickly because there just hasn't been the approvals. And in a tougher market where there's not the pre-sales, there won't be stock that can be built because you need pre-sales for funding, or developers do. So we're moving into a little bit of a crisis in housing in Sydney and actually all over Australia.
So I know you know that data off the back of your hand pretty much, but let's just go back to that comment. So there's basically a quarter of the amount of supply there was back in the peak, I think you said 2017.
That's right.
And why is there only a quarter of supply of new housing now? What's developers not getting approvals, I think you mentioned?
No, not approvals, but what's happened, there's been significant change to the market where we've had COVID, we've had little immigration, we've had a market where people off plan, it's because you buy off the plan, it's a 2 or 3 year decision to buy out. It hasn't been as strong as like the real estate market where people are buying to move now. And supply is whilst it's dictated by demand, developers can't develop property unless they meet bank requirements around pre-sales. So we've been in a very inactive market with restrictions, COVID restrictions, people concerned about their work, employment and so on. And as we've just started to improve, we've had this invasion of Ukraine. We've had the inflation sort of stats go through the roof, and the banks responding with greatly increased interest rates and very sharp rises. So it's made buyers very uncomfortable to make a longer term decision at the moment. And as a result, without the sales, there won't be the building starts.
So it's actually a bit of the demand has eased in terms of the developers aren't getting the pre-sales for these projects to get them out of the ground.
That's right. And that'll change very quickly because we've got record low vacancy rates across Australia. Vacancy rates across Australia are at 1%. On the Gold Coast, they're 0.5%. In Sydney, it's about 1.3%. They are the tightest vacancy rates I've ever seen in my history in real estate. And what's happening is you've got rental growth that's in the double-digit figures. Rents I think in Sydney last year went up about 12%. I think in Melbourne, 15%. But the rents are becoming, like interest rates are increasing rapidly and are going to continue as such a shortage. And that's going to then fuel more demand from investors, more people that are renting wanting to buy because they'll see it as a more affordable means, even with increased interest rates. So what will happen is there's going to be such a tight market that's going to drive demand. Now, the other thing is we don't have high levels of immigration yet. I think we're forecast to return in 2024. Our research department says that, well, research guys will say that we're going to return in 2024. We're going to have immigration at the levels pre-COVID, and it will increase from there. So once we get that wave of immigration, it's going to put a lot more pressure on rentals. And hopefully, I'll say the economy will sort itself out. These interest rates will have their effect and they'll stabilise, and then people will be back buying. We have very high employment, a very healthy economy.
So we haven't really seen much rental growth until recently, right? In the last few years before this year, rents were kind of staying at the same level for a while as rates were coming down.
Well, initially rents came back with the start of COVID, and a lot of the students went back. You had a little bit of rental decline, and then that's a lot of people that were investors sold property at that time as well. We one of our biggest markets was competing with second-hand stock, and like in Green Square, you had a lot of investors. As that rental market slowed, they thought with COVID they'd sell. All of those buyers typically were owner-occupiers buying in because you could fix interest rates at 2.5%, 3%. I mean, you're on the money side, you would have seen it. So we had a lot of buyers buy in that take up that stock. So the pool of rental property dropped dramatically, and now we're seeing the consequences of it, and the approvals are very slow to obtain. So typically, let's say a straightforward approval is taking 12 to 15 months through local council, but larger developments are taking 2 to 3 years often. So
and it's harder here locally than other markets too, like Melbourne and Brisbane. The approvals are a lot easier, right?
Much quicker, yes, they are. New South Wales, they're not.
And does that also equate to the supply, really? Because
definitely, yes.
Developers want to work in those markets, right?
If you think we need sort of 25,000 apartments approved a year. I think it's about 45,000, including housing, freestanding and attached housing is total what New South Wales needs on average a year.
And we're doing 7,000, you said, units?
7,000 apartments. Housing is still about 14,000 or so.
So we're still below the mark.
We're well and truly below the mark. And what's happening now is you've got sharply increased building costs. If builders are faced with, or developers are faced with now cost increases of 20 to 25% on building costs from 12 months ago. So a lot of jobs also are rendered unfeasible or made unfeasible because they don't work financially. So we've got developers stalling on or putting jobs on hold until, I'll say, the market catches up. So it's a sort of perfect storm where we've got costs are really expensive. Interest rates have added to the cost of development.
Blowing out.
You've got very few approvals. So for the next 3 to 5 years, we're going to have this critical shortage. And what that's going to do is put pressure on pricing, and is going to put enormous pressure on rentals. And we're seeing already now investors coming back into the market, mainly who have bought off the plan before, because they're seeing what they've got. They're seeing rental increases, and they're going, I can buy today. I don't settle for 3 years. Rents will probably be 25, 30% more, and I'm locking in a price on what is a much lower cost base than what it's going to be.
And naturally, investors like the brand new units that CBRE will be selling because of the depreciation sort of
appreciation.
Benefits.
We generally, we work in good areas, good developers, so they buy good product. Yeah.
So going back to that supply sort of fundamental issue locally here in Sydney in particular. So then if there's a problem that won't be fixed in the near future, I think you said there's probably going to be a 3-year problem because these developments can't get out of the ground, and that's going to, cause a supply issue probably for the next 3 years. Is that right?
No, it's going to be a lot longer. Because if you think, even if everything was built today that's just been approved, that's 7,000, I think, 200 units that'll be delivered in the next 2 to 3 years, and we need over 20,000. So let's say next year there's 15,000 approved. That'll be another 2 to 3 years before next year. Let's say the year after we get back up to approvals of 20,000, that's another 3 years away. So you've got this enormous pent-up demand, under supply, and you only start to reach meeting demand in probably 5 years, and then you've got another 2 or 3 years of catching up.
And you can't really see anything that's going to change that issue, right?
What's happened previously, a lot of people have migrated interstate where their cost of living increases in their capital city. So there's been always, Queensland's grown off the back of migration out of New South Wales and Victoria. Now, what's happening, the Brisbane is, I think, less than 1% vacancy. Gold Coast is 0.5%. There's the Olympics coming. There's an enormous amount of building work up there, a lot of tradespeople. There's nowhere to live. So it's going to hamper that migration. So people are going to say, well, I'm not getting a better lifestyle. Why will I move? So you've got pressures that we haven't experienced before because we've never had such a critical shortage. And we're not at all starting to make gains on supplying stock that'll meet that shortage. It's a housing crisis is about to occur, and it's happening nationally.
And with this, housing crisis as such, so we talked about that the demand wasn't there also for the pre-sales and whatnot. Is that going to a bit of an affordability issue? Is things like, the waiving of stamp duty going to make a big difference? It comes into effect in January for first home buyers. Are we heading in the right direction at least to make people be able to afford these first homes?
Well, what we are, like all those incentives make a difference, particularly if you're a first home buyer and you've got to save $50,000, $60,000, $70,000 for stamp duty, which is payable before you settle, and all of a sudden that's you get relief on that payment. It goes towards your deposit. It makes a huge difference.
Big chunk of your deposit, yeah.
The government benefits around mortgage insurance savings for first home buyers is a great benefit, and I think they're really good initiatives. But the big change has been assessment of affordability. A lot of people can borrow on afford loans today. However, what the banks are doing, or the feedback we're getting, is they're taking today's rate, they're building in increases on today's rate and saying this is where we will likely be, where the markets are forecasting, and then we're building in a buffer of 3% above that, and then we're adding 25% to your living expenses. So all of us, in assessing your ability to repay the loan, so the ability to borrow is being greatly reduced, even though you can afford it.
There's too many buffers being applied.
Too many buffers, yeah.
There's a buffer
too many
on the
roadblocks.
Rate. They take a buffer on, bonus income and commission income.
That's right. They assess rents at half what the rent is.
Yeah. There's
as if we've got a short. How ludicrous is it that the banks go, we'll only assess half of the rent you get off the property just in case it's vacant, and we've got a vacancy rate of 1.3%.
And then they don't make it easy for people buying some of these brand new units. They're quite sometimes
very difficult,
conservative on the valuations, and that doesn't give people confidence. So yeah.
Now the other big thing that's happened in this market is the freestanding housing market. In a sense, it decoupled from the apartment market. There was such growth in price in housing. In a lot of areas, if you sort of said pre-COVID to now, house prices have gone up 40 to 50%. Now, that isn't sustainable, and those prices will come back. At the same time, I think the average unit price or median unit price went up about 8%. So that the price differential between houses and apartments has never been greater. And the housing being so expensive, we're seeing it now. That's pushing a lot of buyers that would have traditionally bought a house into the apartment market. So there's quite a market or cultural shift too, where people are now looking at apartments as the long-term living proposition and going, look, we'll buy here as long as we've got great amenity downstairs or garden areas, or we're near amenity that we can enjoy. We'll buy an apartment because it's a lot more affordable than buying a house.
Yeah, that's a valid point you just raised that I want to just go back on. That sort of unsustainable growth that we saw in that COVID boom through sort of 2020 and 2021. I think in Sydney, across the Sydney market, it was 27.7%, so near 30% growth in about 12, 18-month period. So seeing a bit of a correction right now in that growth is probably warranted, right?
I think it is. Like, I had a house in Manly that I moved from, as an example. I went to sell just at the beginning of COVID, and I wasn't able to sell it. I was offered $4.2 million or something for it. Anyway, 12 months later, I've got a buyer offering me $5.5 million. And I'm thinking, God, that was lucky that I didn't sell it at the time, and it's probably worth more now. Now, it's ridiculous. I say that's great for my benefit, but it's ridiculous that it's gone up that amount of money. Now, apartments haven't. So I'm biased, and as a plug, time to buy is right now. Go out and buy something off the plan, because I can guarantee prices are going to be a lot more in 3 years, and there's going to be very little supply. And you go, if you're moving, you'll say, what a great buy I've bought. If you're renting, you'll go, and my rents are 30% above where they're at today.
Actually, this is not a deliberate plug-in, but I did buy a property through CBRE many years ago. And one thing that's good for investors, I feel, with buying brand new units. What I loved about my one is that I bought that back in 2014 off the plan, didn't settle till 2016, and what was great, I haven't actually spent $1 on any maintenance issues. And the problem that sometimes people have when they buy, I know the popular Art Deco type buildings or those, more unique, rare type units, is you end up getting hit a lot of the time for special levies on repairs and fixing things. The good thing about a brand new unit, you pretty much get a brand new unit that you don't have to do any maintenance for a long period of time, right?
Right, and particularly now you've got David Chandler, the building commissioner. That's the government's appointed as a building commissioner with wide-ranging powers that stepped in to clean up some of the work where the few shoddy developers. There's a small minority that do the wrong thing. They will be no longer in business. There's a rating system. The Department of Fair Trading are heavily involved in overseeing that work. Now the compliance around new development is so strong, and I'll say such a great thing for the industry, because if you're buying off the plan now, you've got real assurity about the quality of the product being delivered. Now, we've always worked with reputable developers, but I know there's some horror stories there of buyers that have bought off the plan before where that they haven't bought off a reputable developer. Well, those people will no longer be in business, and the standards being imposed around quality control and being measured and how they're checked are very thorough, and it's going to ensure that buying off the plan now, you buy what you've been promised. You buy it as what's in the brochure, which I think is great for consumers.
The system is weaning out those bad operators.
It fully is. It fully is. It's not there's no legislation in the government. And I'll tell you what it's going to do is make sure when you buy something, you buy with confidence in New South Wales.
Which is good, yeah. I know, and once again, doesn't sound like I'm trying to plug in CBRE, but you definitely have always partnered up with reputable developers who have great architects. All those projects in the inner city have been fantastic. Like I said, me personally, I saw a bit of growth in a 2-year period on a property before I even settled, which was great. And I've never struggled to get a tenant in there because it's a popular brand new unit in the heart of Surrey Hills there. Talk to me a bit more about these investors coming back. Where are you seeing, what markets are you seeing throughout Sydney, if you've got knowledge on other markets? What areas are they being drawn to at the moment?
Mainly areas where, any areas around transport. I think that's one thing, and particularly people are seeing even with the cost of fuel now and cost increases, people want good amenity in public transport. We're doing a lot in the Northwest Corridor out from Castle Hill through to Rouse Hill, Tallawong. You can buy a new apartment, a 2-bedroom apartment on a train station out there for less than $700,000. It'll rent its head off. There's strong demand. You've got shops, new schools, everything.
And what's that train station to the city? What's the commute roughly?
It'll be it's about 35 minutes. And when the new railway line opens from Chatswood through to Martin Place, I think it'll save the changeover at Chatswood will save about another 5 or 8 minutes.
And so that's what property owners want to see, right? Investors and owner-occupiers, they want to see money being spent on public transport, money being spent on infrastructure. And so those areas,
These areas are really attractive because it's not only the transport, but you've got new shopping centres, you've got new schools, new hospitals. The new infrastructure is incredible. And they're master planned areas, so there's often great parks, great walkways, cycleways. Everything's planned. It's not the sort of piecemeal redevelopment you see of some older industrial areas that are rezoned.
But some of these areas in the northwest there, it's not about just the commute to the city. They're going to other business districts, right?
Yes, they are. And particularly post-COVID where people are working from home and you'll find that employers are looking at making it more available for people to work from home and in outer areas. So you've got, if you're out in the northwest area, you've got Norwest Business Park, which is enormous, Chatswood, Macquarie University, Macquarie Park with all the industry. So a lot of people that are living in these areas, Norwest, they're not coming to the city. The city might be a weekend visit,
or even Parramatta, right? It's not far
it's very close to Parramatta. And going out, if you're in Rouse Hill, you might go out in Castle Hill or Chatswood. The city's not whilst the city's the centre of Sydney as such, it's not the centre for all people. So you get a lot of people now that are living in areas that have a lifestyle centred around that. So, and if you look at Norwest, I think a train comes every 4 minutes.
Yeah, wow.
So you're on it. You walk if you're anywhere near the station, they connect to a bus or whatever. You're on a train within 4 minutes. I think that's peak hour, and I think it's 8 minutes outside of peak hour.
So going back to some of your favourite areas, so Northwest is one of them. What other markets are you seeing, as a good opportunity for growth where investors or owner-occupiers should look? And not just Sydney, if you've got exposure to Melbourne or Brisbane, what would you say?
Well, I think nationally, most markets are good to buy into. What you want to be conscious of as a buyer is looking, why will, if you're looking at it as an investment, why will someone want to rent in the area? And that's, again, so back to transport, shops, schools, amenity, what people need to be convenient. And I've always found that, and areas that are, you've got new areas that offer a lot of opportunity, but you've got generally established areas where there's tighter supply, again, tend to outperform the market. So if you're in Sydney, anywhere that you're buying into the city, inner city area, middle ring now, they're generally markets that are very strong. The CBD, particularly in Sydney, I think, has really suffered as a result of COVID. Business hasn't returned to usual. The restaurants are starting to open now. Bars opening. There's a lot of work being done in the city on infrastructure. So the city, I think, has been an area that people have overlooked for some time, and the opportunity to buy in the city now has probably never been better.
And there's still limited supply in the city, right?
And there's going to be always very limited supply.
And they're trying to make a proactive effort to make the CBD more of a lifestyle area over the weekend, keep restaurants and bars buzzing over the weekend, right?
That's exactly right. Like you look at the amount of new restaurants and the amount of refurbished areas that there's such great restaurants, bars, there's such great entertainment in the city. It'll come back, it'll be better than it's ever been. Restrictions have been lifted on trading hours, which really killed the city pre-COVID.
Yeah.
You've got Justin Hems has just put that other site in the city that he's going to, as I understand, recreate the Ivy again. And so there's someone that's very successful, and you're saying the city's investing more money there because it is leading the way.
So back on the $1 million question then about the housing market and property prices, right? This is something that we won't quote you on, but who knows? You might have that crystal ball. So have you seen the same sort of discounting on brand new units that we're seeing across the market, which I think at the moment is about 6%, is it, in Sydney?
No, not at all. We're seeing the opposite.
Because of the supply issue.
And cost issue.
And cost, of course.
What we're seeing is buildings where we've met pre-sale targets and a builder's in place and then the funding's in place, all of those clients are increasing their costs because they've suffered the building cost increases. The margins in development have suffered significantly. They've got to try and reclaw some of that back. And their view is, well, if we're starting building now in 2 years when that job's going to be finished, we're going to be in a very different market. So we'll price in that.
So this goes back to your point on why some developers can't get out of the ground because they can't make the numbers stack up, right?
The numbers stack up.
The feasibility's not there because, especially in Sydney, the big issue is they've got to pay so much for the land in the first place. The opportunity to develop something's hard.
Then you've had building costs that have sort of gone up between 20-25%, and there might be some savings that come back as supply chain issues ease up, but you're not going to see wholesale cost reductions. I was at a lunch the other day where Chris Minns, the Labor opposition leader, spoke, and he quoted a stat that's in one of the things they're wanting to do is improve career opportunities for young people. I think it's 7 years ago he quoted there were 50,000 people at TAFE undertaking apprenticeships in building trades. This last year there's 24,000.
Yeah, that's good. That shows the demand for that industry, right?
That's right, but there's not the supply per labour either coming through. 24,000 apprentices is half what there was a few years ago. Who's going to build these properties?
Oh, sorry, you said it went from 24 down to 12.
No, it went to 50 down to 24,000.
Oh, sorry, I thought you said the other way around. Wow, okay.
No, so
it's
you've got
halved.
It's halved. So there's all these different pressures. So you've got a market that's going to be, I'll say again, that's stock constrained, and that's going to be the case for a very long time. And the cost of production is going to be very high and increasing.
That's just a sign of the new generation. They watch all these TV shows and movies where they can have a fancy job in one of those cool WeWork spaces or whatnot, working from home.
That's right.
And they don't, and then there's no demand for those actual traditional type labour jobs, right?
That's right. And so there's less people to be building these apartments. Now, the other thing is just, you know, there's a lot of talk around inflation and trying to curb inflation. Rent increases are one of the increases measured in inflation. So if you've got rent increases of 10, 12% a year, that feeds directly into their inflation numbers.
Yeah, of course.
So you've got factors. It's hard to say what will happen, but I'll say something's got to give, because interest rates will get to a point where they peak it'll be unsustainable to continue to increase them.
I feel like we're not far from that point.
No, that's what all the pundits are saying.
Yeah. All the bank economists are probably only factoring in 1 or 2 more rate rises in the next 6 to 12 months, and we probably will see rates come off in 2024. That's
what's being predicted, but I'll tell you what we won't see is inflation come off greatly, because there's still cost feeding through. We will be in an inflationary environment. And again, if you own property, you generally benefit significantly out of inflation.
Yeah, and apparently spending is still strong in some markets. It's crazy. Rates have gone up aggressively. People are losing confidence, and sentiments change on the front line of the property market, but people are still spending. I think there's some data in the US and whatnot showing there's a slight change, but not much. So it's going to be scary to see what the government's going to have to do to decrease that spending to ease inflation, right?
Yeah, I don't know if they can. They can sort of they need to put the brakes on a little bit, but I think fundamentally we've got a very healthy economy that's supply constrained in everywhere. You go to buy a new car, you know, you can be waiting 6 to 18 months depending on the car that you're purchasing. Second-hand cars are selling for what they sold new 2 and 3 years ago.
Yeah, sometimes more if it's a special car. So, David, obviously, you know, selling thousands of units a year, surely you'd also be privy to seeing what the average homeowner or investor actually wants to buy. You know, is there more 1-bedders, 2-bedders or 3-bedders being desired? You know, different types of living arrangements in terms of outdoor living and people not wanting to be maybe so high up and more sort of ground level type apartments or houses. Talk to me.
Okay, we're seeing quite really changing trends in that market of demand and what buyers are looking for. And one thing that happened with COVID, people being at home really started to think about what their environment is and what they need. So we're seeing in all apartments increased demand for apartments with great storage, and that's both in the apartment and in the basement. We're seeing people much more concerned about the ground floor amenity, what garden area there is, what areas they can congregate in and use, their kids can use.
After being locked up at home for 2 years.
Yeah, true. That's what
literally.
we're seeing. We're seeing, so you don't need great outdoor area, but on an apartment as such, like people want a balcony, an area they have a barbecue and table and chairs. But what they do want is great common area.
Yeah.
And then we've seen demand for 3-bedroom apartments increase. What we've seen is demand for 1-bedroom apartments slow, demand for 3 bedrooms increase, and we've got a lot more younger families making the choice to buy an apartment as opposed to a house, just for convenience and affordability reasons. And apartments are being better designed to cater for families. And we've seen a lot of empty nesters that are buying, would buy always a 3-bedroom apartment, prefer to buy a larger 2-bedroom apartment and have the space and put some money aside to go. They're buying a holiday home. They're buying something in the country up the coast. We're seeing people now setting up with retirement thing. They'll have 2 places to live.
Yeah, that was from that urban sprawl, you could say, of people going out and living in Southern Highlands or Central Coast or South Coast, and then through COVID when they were working from home, and then now they're coming back and realising they probably still want an apartment or something in the city, right?
They are. And I'll tell you, funny enough, there's more people cooking at home. We sell apartments where the kitchens are a little bit larger or better, more functional. People pay a premium for it.
Yeah, actually,
and that's something it's a real change.
I did see on the news actually through COVID that there was a huge increase in the sale of cookbooks. So clearly people were cooking a lot more at home.
We're giving more options in apartments. We've often will include a home study area, or you can have a bar in that area, but different options. People want a home study area. We did one in Crow's Nest where we said you can have a bar and a study area, and the majority of buyers took it up. It's people sort of their home is much more. I mean, it's always been important to them, but they're more conscious about the small detail and more particular. And now with selling off the plan, there's so much more information available. Buyers go and look, and they can research and think, gee, what suits me? Like we used to recommend to developers as a typical thing, 3 metres a built-in robe and a main bedroom. We're now 4 metres.
Yeah,
people want extra storage. To sort of see all these little nuances to come through in the market that we know when we give the design brief to the architect, say this is what you should be building, this is what the buyer wants. It's so much more refined.
So I was just about to say, you're giving that type of buyer frontline feedback to these developers, and they're absorbing it and reacting and
absolutely. The smart developers are, definitely, and because they want to have product that sells well, best meets the market, so they do. Like we generate in Sydney at the moment, it's a slower market. We generate about 400 or 500 inquiries a week, but typically we will generate 1,500 to 1,800 property inquiries a week. So we get an enormous amount of information on what the buyers are looking for, and when you get that sort of volume, you get across a market, you see the trends, and you're seeing what people want. Like people vote with their wallet, they buy what they like, so you're seeing it.
So on that note, have developers changed their mix of apartments to be more 2-bedders and less 3-bedders?
No.
What about 1-bedders?
Increasing number of 3 bedrooms.
Okay.
And decreasing number of 1 bedrooms. Yeah. And 2 bedrooms probably, I'll say similar type demand.
Because there was a big demand for 1 bedrooms at one point, maybe 5 years ago, right?
There was, with more investors in the market. And I think that'll increase again because of affordability. You'll have a lot of buyers that would have bought a 2-bedroom unit buy a 1-bedroom, a 1-bedroom plus study. So I think that trend will start to change, reverse itself as well.
What about parking? Is that changing with Uber?
It is. I'll tell you, the councils are very restrictive on parking controls.
Especially locally.
So you'll say most developments are have less parking than what the current market demands. However, everyone now uses an Uber, and there's some great car share setups. Like I know GoGet, everyone goes immediately to it, but there's a lot of private operators putting good quality cars in basements for the residents only to use, and they're really affordable. And you've got great quality cars you can book online. There's a group now that are providing Teslas, and it's for the residents only. It's not someone else out of the area can come and take your Go-Get car out of the basement, and you know the quality of what you've got there. And it's the cost impost is minimal because it's not a cost to the body corporate to buy the car. It's a monthly cost added across the apartment. So where you might have needed 2 cars and you only use the second one every now and again, now you don't need to.
There's a big sort of attitude change, and I guess the Sydney City Council in particular is really trying to get cars off the road, right? So you're seeing, I've seen a lot of CBRE developments around there, like there's a while ago now, but Griffiths T and whatnot, very limited amount of car spots, and some, even of the new commercial type developments, the Sydney City Council is saying, if you put less basement parking in, we'll let you build higher as an actual building, right?
Yeah, that's what they want is they're restricting. They're not necessarily let you building more, but they are restricting the parking. But that's happening. It's a trend, and what is happening, like around the world, people are relying less on private transport and more on public transport. And in Sydney, these new underground railway lines, they're fantastic. Like we're talking about northwest Sydney. You'll be able to get on the train and get out Barangaroo. Now, Barangaroo is a fabulous area. Great entertainment, the parks. You're right on the edge of the start of the city.
On the water.
You go up to Martin Place, 1 stop longer. I think it's about 2 minutes. So the convenience, why would you get a taxi or drive from an area out of Sydney into the city when you can use great public transport? And Sydney hasn't had that before. Now, it's been the heavy railway line, and it's and I'll say the areas that it services are built up as such, but outside of that, there's very poor transport options. Now there's greatly increased transport options. So you're going to find particularly a lot of young people are going to say, we need 1 car or we don't need the car. And car sharing, I mean, I've got salespeople and in my office, a couple that live in the inner west, they've got 1 car space at home, so they use Go-Get regularly. And I go, they say, look, the cost of it, we're saving on a car, we're saving insurance, we're saving maintenance, we've only got 1 spot, we're saving our parking, and we save a fortune with Go-Get. Get online, book a car, and here it is.
And the city in particular, just going back to that point, they're even taking roads off the traffic off the road. Is in George Street. They put that tram line right through, but I believe recently I saw a proposal even to get rid of the cars adjacent to that tram line, right?
That's right. They're restricting parking as they want to move more to public transport. So it's a great thing. The other thing that's happening in most new developments of any, and I won't say large scale, even smaller scale, councils are requiring that you put in car share facilities. Dedicated for car. So it's becoming, it's cool. It's really good.
Yeah, that's really good.
It's going to meet the needs of the future. So you've got these developments where you're in a 1-bedroom unit, you want to go away for the weekend, you don't have to ring up Hertz. You've got a car downstairs you can book, you pay for it and you use your car share facility.
So is this a developer proposing it, or is this the council suggesting it?
Sydney City Council requiring it.
Yes, okay.
A lot of councils are requiring it. And then developers are looking at it and going, gee, this is what the market needs anyway. So where it's not often required, they're making planning round or making it available because they know that it's what the demand is for.
That's good. That's a good initiative. So are other councils outside the city getting on board this?
They are fully.
Yeah, in other markets, Parramatta.
In other markets, yes. Yep.
So going back to the question, I guess a car spot in a unit development, for a purchaser of a brand new unit, it's not as sought after. Is that what you're saying?
Well, it's becoming less sought after. Yeah, not as sought after. I mean, some people are wedded to their cars. You've got a younger market that are not, and you see a younger market that's they're adopting technology. If you look at what's happening with Uber Eats, look at the delivery of home meals. You look at the delivery of food from the shopping centres. You order something online from Woolworths and it's delivered. We're putting in a lot of developments, facilities, cold storage, and the rest of it into areas that this food can be dropped off. So we've got very, very much changing trends. And I'll say it's the older, more established market that relies on cars. But once they start to see they don't need to, and they don't need to, a lot of people are going to say, I don't need the expense.
And naturally, the government are going to make more and more incentives or disincentives, you could say, to stop people from even owning a car. They say the cost of owning a car with your rego and whatnot is going to probably increase over time. They want less and less people on the road, right?
Well, we've just a new lady that's going to be starting with us to move from the UK. She's been in the UK working for CBRE for 10 years. She's come to Australia. She doesn't have a car licence. She's never learned to drive. She's in her early 30s. She said, in London, no one needs a car. And I think we're going to follow the trend of international cities. If you're in New York, I'd say 10% of the population has a car.
So going back to something you said earlier on, these apartments versus houses and the demand. So through COVID, we saw a big run in houses versus apartments. I think numbers were
absolutely
about 30% versus 7%. Was that about right?
Yeah, we saw growth in price around there. Yep.
So do you think now we're going to see the opposite? Because I know in some of these house and land packages, even out in Camden, Campbelltown, and up in the northwest, you're paying up to $1 million for an empty block of land, vacant land. Then you've got to build a house, right?
And now you've got trouble getting a builder.
Yeah, now you've got trouble getting a builder, especially because of these rising costs. People don't want to really commit to the unknown. So
you've also got the situation, and we'll talk, let's say, that empty nester market, where you've got people now living in a home, their kids are leaving school, they've had to leave school, and they've had this incredible price growth, and they're going, it's time to cash up, buy an apartment, have a better lifestyle. So you've got the affordability bit where people can't afford a home that are buying into an apartment. You've got the other end where you've got the baby boomers, which is the biggest buying market now for good quality luxury apartments because they're wanting to change their lifestyle and they've seen great growth in their house price, so they're cashed up.
And some of these markets where those house and land packages thrived don't compare to these developments we're talking about with these facilities for everyone in the unit block to benefit of, and also having a new train station down the road that can take them to one of these business districts in 5 minutes, right?
Yep.
It's chalk and cheese offerings for the occupants, right?
It really is, yes, yeah. So anyway, so there's the market's changing, and I think I'll say there's underlying there's going to be very strong pent-up demand. We just need to be an economy where people have a little bit more comfortable or surety around interest rates. and the banks need to look to ease back on some of their lending restrictions.
So I know you probably can't be too biased. You've got to please all your clients as such, but surely you've got some favourite developers that you like, that you proudly sort of sell their stock as such. Some architects that you like as well, coupled up with these developers. Are you able to name a few for us?
Yeah, definitely. Well, I'm very biased, I'll say that. And we've only got very good developers. That's one thing we like to work with good people that take pride in their work. A developer that we're doing an enormous amount of work for is Daycorp, privately owned, Australian-owned company. The principal there's been in business for over 20 years, and what he builds is really good quality, affordable stock. And he's now moved into the city market where he's going to be building a 50-storey luxury tower on Hyde Park, which is just a really exciting development.
How many units is that?
Only 168 apartments.
Okay.
Views that will never be built out over Hyde Park, out through the harbour, the heads. We've got local developers around the North Shore like Maid and Helm that win awards constantly for the quality of their work. Central Element, we launched a job on the weekend down Chatswood. If you say a slower market, we made 25 sales there on the weekend, and one of the reasons is because they have such a good reputation and the quality of their stock's so good. I mean, I could go on and name a lot of developers there, but there's the benefit of working with good quality developers that are so passionate about what they're doing and very conscious about the quality of their product is buyers see that.
They care about their reputation too,
they
right?
do.
They want repeat business, they want people to be happy once they move into their new home and get the keys, not to find surprises and
that's exactly
disappointments
right.
as such.
Yeah, very, very right. So, we've got a lot of high quality, and I'll say world class. We're going to be working with Lendlease on One Circular Quay, which will be probably the most exciting residential development that's ever been developed in Australia.
Yeah, wow.
Point blank on Circular Quay.
You really do get the fun stock to sell.
Yep.
Yeah, that's Sydney's best luxury new apartments there in the city. Tell me that one in Hyde Park. What end of Hyde Park is that coming to?
So that's the southern end of Hyde Park. It's a block off Elizabeth Street on Liverpool. And what happens in that Hyde Park area, all along Elizabeth Street, apart from some buildings built previously, the height plane is governed by the overshadowing of the park. So you've got buildings that are 15 or 20 levels there that can never be built higher because of this. So this sits behind that. So above level 20, you have views that will never be built out.
And what's starting price on a 2-bedroom unit or whatnot?
2-bedroom apartment there will have from prices will start sort of $2.5 million, low 2 millions.
And they go up to
sort of early 4 millions.
Okay.
3 bedrooms from 5 million to 8.5.
And typically, who's that for? Downsizers?
Downsizers, people in the city upgrading from older apartments, people that are renting in the city that haven't been able to find what they want that'll buy in. You'll get a lot of, we get a lot of North Shore people wanting to move to the city, but they don't want to be. They want to be on the edge. They want to be in Hyde Park. You got this sort of straddles the southern CBD and Surrey Hills.
Yeah, I was about to say, that's on the border of Surrey Hills, so they can walk into all those
great
restaurants
food and beverage offerings. You're $10 in an Uber up to Potts Point. You're up Oxford Street up to some of the great restaurants, cafes there. So for a Boyd lifestyle, you're not stuck in the city. You're very close to everything, and you can walk to work in the city. And Hyde Park's just magnificent. Like, boy, that's a beautiful park down to Botanic Gardens. I often walk in from Neutral Bay across the bridge and go for a walk, then spend time there. And I think it's sort of, it's one of the great parks of the world.
So, David, one other thing that I've noticed in markets throughout Sydney, councils are really transforming the public facilities and stuff as such, the parks, the boardwalks, and that's actually partly to thank from the developers, right? Because the developers in getting things approved do these VPAs, voluntary planning agreements, where they subsidise the cost of building these things for the council, right? They
do. They make major contributions, and the way these a lot of these, it depends. All sites are very different, and the councils have different approaches. But you've got like down at North Stane at Manly, we did development there recently. The setback that's required there is changed from previous approvals, so that eventually they're retaining land along the front of North Stain there to widen the strip to the beach. Now, over the time, and if you're down there, if you're down at Manly, you'll see some of the building setback outworks. That will take place. You've got all these cycleways that are being built. You've got through site links like at we call it St Leonard's South, the Lane Cove area. It's been rezoned. There's going to be a lot of development. The gardens and the requirement for landscapes, the developments all connect. So you've got these park-like connected gardens running through the developments, which is a lot better for residential amenity and a much more comfortable area. So things are planned now. That the developers are providing more back to the community, and there's a greater plan, not just about a single development, but how that adds and shapes the area surrounding it.
And so that's tied in, both those examples you gave are tied into the new developments coming to the market. So the potential purchaser of these properties, they get not only exposure to a fancy new development as such, but the actual area being developed and the developer contributing to the council's plans.
There is, like a great example is the Greenland Tower in the city that we sold. Part of the VPA, part of the requirements for the approval was Greenland had to give back to Sydney City Council and give back. It's a separate stratum. It's Sydney City Council owns it. These areas set up for local artists to be able to use. So you can book them, hire them. I'm not sure how the process works, but there's a significant amount of space that there is available for young emerging artists to be able to use as space that wouldn't otherwise be available if that development wasn't built.
That's great. What a great initiative. Goes to show supporting some of these developers makes a big difference.
Yeah, it does. Yeah, development often gets a bad rap, but we need places to live, and developers, if you'd say, they're the most innovative people. They're very design conscious. They're building things that are intended to last for generations, and they're trying to build things that are going to be suitable for the future. So
they do get a bad rap sometimes, unfortunately, and normally it's from the direct neighbours to development sites when a big apartment block's going up next to them or something like that, right?
It is. I read somewhere like in Mossman Council, a developer that we're working with, highlighted the fact that of the last 14 developments for apartments in Mossman Council, 12 have been knocked back at the local level, and they've had to go to the Land Environment Court to get an approval. Well, that's disgraceful. The council's wasting money. The ratepayers fighting these cases where they'll be approved if they comply, which in most cases they do, and that money could be better spent going on more community
infrastructure
ventures and infrastructure.
Yeah, definitely. All right, well, that's been fantastic, David. Thank you so much for coming on board. We really appreciate your time. You've given us amazing insight there. Would love to have you on again in the future, and maybe we can reflect on some of these things we spoke about, and maybe we could say, I told you so.
Well, I hope so, Theo. Look, buy property. It's never been a better time. That's the final plug. Thanks, Theo. Thanks very much.
Thanks, David. Thanks for coming on.